Everyone is a star child, made of stardust and the infinite potential of the universe. This extraordinary field is something in each of us clamors for freedom from the bonds of fear, conformity, and an ordinary life. Welcome to Dr. Durr's Living in the Sweet Spot, where practical tools and solutions from the intersection of mind-body medicine, science, and spiritual well-being awaken and empower you to live out your infinite potential, to live life in the sweet spot. Racism is something that has been shown to affect our mental health and our physical health. So today, joining me again on the platform is Dr. LaMarr Darnell Shields, so we can talk about some life-saving approaches that impacts racism's effect upon our mental health and physical health. Well, hello there.
Hey.
Welcome back.
Thanks for inviting me back. I must have done something right. I guess I didn't piss off your producers or your listeners or the engineer enough that they found it good for me to come back. And so I appreciate being invited back into your room. And as I read everybody all the time, Salvona, which says, I see you. So Salvona to you and your listeners.
Well, Salvona, am I saying it correctly?
Salvona. Salvona.
Okay, Salvona.
There we go. Got
it. Okay, all right. And so you know what, as you well know, you and I talk, there's so much that we have to say to each other. And again, you know, one of the things I was definitely always grateful for too is that, you know, that is your thanking of, you know, the ancestors. And you know, I know that you know, there was obviously Dr. Carter G. Woodson, Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, who've been very impactful upon your career. And then I know there are a few others, if you just want to mention, you know, maybe
the most
another 2-3 real quickly, including your mom.
There we go. Eileen D. Shields, the most impactful. I mean, got a shout out to her, Willie Nell Johnson, my elementary school teacher at St. Leo, John Henry Clark, Dr. Francis, not only Francis Cresswellson, but Dr. Francis Staten from Grambling State University, and my homegirl, Dr. Marva Collins. I can name so many people: Ida B. Wells, Malifi Asante, Marilyn Cloud Bethune, you as well. And so I thank all those individuals who poured into me directly or indirectly via books on tape, via in a workshop, sitting in a mosque, synagogue, or a church, or in the back alley at a dice game, or at a pool hall, who shared some knowledge with me. I'll take it for whatever it's worth, because I go to places where, that's why Jesus was so revolutionary. I go to places where folks don't expect us to be, and so that's where you got to take the message.
Yeah, I mean, I always find that really interesting that folks think that you gotta stay where the help isn't necessarily needed, right? I can't. How do I help somebody in terms of, you know, my context as a physician? How do I help somebody as a physician if I'm not helping someone who's sick, right? If you well, you don't need my help.
Yeah.
Right. So just as a reminder to folks about your unique wonderfulness and brilliance, Dr. LaMarr Darnell Shields is the founder and director of, I love this title, Director of Education and Innovations at the Cambio Group, right? And you're also a former professor at the Johns Hopkins School of Education.
Yes.
So again, welcome back. And you know, you are always welcome here in this space.
Well, I love these conversations. You and our colleagues, friends, family, we read some of the same information, we watch some of the same TV shows, we discuss some of the same music. And so I never feel like that this is an interview. I just feel like that we're allowing some people in our space that wouldn't normally be in the space, eavesdropping on some information that we're going to be sharing with them. And so anytime there's an opportunity to come and have a conversation with you and reach out to your listeners, I'm always going to welcome that. I mean, again, as we talk about my work and your work, lately I have been doing a lot of work around meditation and mindfulness. And one of the reasons that I started studying a woman by the name of Ruth King, who wrote an amazing book around mindfulness and self-care and racism. And so just by the mere opportunity to be around her and study at Johns Hopkins when we were doing research on meditation years ago, I then started to realize that, racism in this country still remains one of the most rooted and painful impasses of our time. I just got a chance to watch the film by the great director, producer, writer, Ava DuVernay. I encourage your listeners to go and check it out. It's called Origin. And it reminded me that racism is fed through unawareness, oppressive systems, and the misuse of power. And I got to stress that the misuse of power, because we all have power, but the scars of history and racism impacts all of us. I don't care what age you are. I don't care what country you come from. It impacts all of our capacity to genuinely love, and it blinds us to our humanity. And so I have rediscovered and discovered this concept of meditation and mindfulness in her book, Mindful of Race, Ruth King, which I encourage anybody to check it out. But Doc, I've been, studying a lot about the effects it is having on our young children, on our children. My son, who went to a private school here in Maryland, every day when I would pick him up, and he grew up strong mom, strong baba, strong sisters, understand the history and culture, but he had a lot of challenges similar to I did growing up in Chicago, but he didn't have a network of other Black and brown children who would speak up, because their belief is, this generation, is that we all get along. Because we live on the same block, we drive the same cars, but racism can affect child development. And you know this, being a psychiatrist that you are. And so I became more concerned watching my son and listening to some of the personal challenges that he was having around the effects of how racism was affecting him in his school and in his studies. So that's sort of where I'm doing a lot of my work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I'm concerned about our babies. I'm concerned of the effects that it's having on many areas. I'm a practitioner of the work, but I keep one foot in the hood, keep one foot in the barrio, and a lot of times in my research, a lot of times something like we researching this stuff, I'm like, we can just talk to our children. They'll let you know this is the most transparent group of people that I think we've ever engaged, and they'll let you know how they feel. You don't even have to do a study. Just go over and ask them, and they will tell you. Our generations older, you got to do a little priding and pulling to get us to talk. They would clearly tell you what's going on with them, and it is really affecting our children, because they're constantly living in this state where they have to be on all the time. And even though we say things are getting a little better, are they really, really getting much better? I don't think that they are. And so I equip my own children with the practice of meditation and mindfulness so they can stay grounded. Like I told these ladies today, I spoke to some clergy, and it was about 20 women pastors throughout the state of Maryland. And I said to them, I want to share with you the things that saved my life, because I know you lay hands on people, but I want to make sure you don't put your hands on people. Some of y'all missed that. Let me say it again. I know you lay hands on people, but this practice of meditation will keep your hands off of people, because there's some people that you, as our homeboy Bernie Mac said, there's going to be some furniture moving up in here if we don't take care of ourselves.
Or as I like to say, I tell folks, one of the things about about me is, part of my childhood was spent in terms of in the Chicago area in Inglewood, and I was raised by peaches. So,
Yeah, some folks don't know who Peaches is, but there's always Peaches in our neighborhood.
Yeah, but you don't want to mess with peaches. Also to your point, what you brought up in terms of the impact of racism, it's just such a distortion because, of course, it's been shown by the director of the Human Genome Project that 99.9% of our genes are the same across humanity. So there's very little that distinguishes us. And racism was actually a fairly recent, I would just say, definition and characterization of our quote unquote physical differences in order to establish dominance and to maintain dominance and superiority of certain groups over other groups. But in actuality and factuality, it's just an indication of what they in our scientific term we call it phenotypic differences. In other words, the difference between how I look and you look, right? The color of our skin, the color of our eyes, differences in textures of hair, etc. So race is really not something that's based in science. It's based in socioeconomics, is what it is. And so I think number one, that's important to establish. But that being said, it's adverse or negative impacts upon our mental and physical health are still dramatic, not only significant, but dramatic. We're talking about it has impact upon your mental health. So we're talking about things like depression, anxiety, PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, problem sleeping. And, if pushed far enough, obviously we're talking about potentially, acts of aggression, including if your depression and anxiety get bad enough, potentially suicide, right? Also, they've shown that there's also potential for psychosis, which again, those kinds is another illness that increases the risk of suicidal behavior. Then physical health, as you well know, right? It's high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, and other kinds of chronic illnesses, and actually obesity, because why? You're releasing chemicals in your body because of that chronic stress, and one of them being high levels of cortisol and inflammation. And you see when you get the belly fat and that kind of rounded face and the rounded torso, that's coming from those high levels of cortisol. And again, you get inflammation, and inflammation is the basis of many physical illnesses and diseases. And so that's why it's important to control chronic inflammation. So it's racism's impact upon physical health and mental health is significant, and in many instances dramatic, both on the kids and both on us as adults. So one of the things I wanted to was actually when we were talking the last time, you said something, of course, that really got my attention. And so I wanted to come back to this so we could kind of talk about this some more, which is you mentioned that there were some things, some approaches that you learned, and I know you mentioned mindfulness in particular, but you mentioned that it saved your life. So I wanted us to get into that today.
So I'll go there, but I want to take 2 steps back. So I want to go back to what you said, and the reason why I, as a person who's been doing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work, is because the impact of racism on the health of African American children is deeply concerning, starting with my own son. And then what I then discovered, there's some new research from the University of Michigan that shows that although racism might not be the most common type of discrimination, because there's so many other types of discrimination, it has the greatest impact on adolescents ages 13 to 19 that they surveyed. And so to measure the impact, what they looked at spikes at what you said, stress hormone called cortisol. In of itself, we know what that is, the presence, what cortisol is. It can be somewhat harmful on any given day. Its levels fluctuate from morning to evening. And then the body's designed how it handles that. And so when teachers are trying to engage a kid who is struggling with that and they aren't culturally connected, they give all these other labels to it. Black, what I've discovered in my work, and again, I'm going to talk about my son in a second, and my daughters, Black children on average experience their first microaggression by age 6. And what kids have told us that ignored complaints of students using racial slurs, Black children getting in trouble for reporting incident discrimination, and then when the George Floyd case magnified, it was off the charts. And
so just for those listeners who may not be familiar with this, what is an example of what characterizes a microaggression?
So my son always, we talk about these little bites on you. So, I didn't know Black people ski. I didn't know
what.
I didn't know Black people went skiing. I didn't know you have an accent. Where are you from? And we all have accents. And so the micro, they have these larger ramifications of it. And so young people are starting to understand the vocabulary. And in my work, vocabulary is very, very important because I want my children to be able to articulate what they're feeling. I don't want them to go to the R word. Racism is a highly loaded word. And
highly charged.
Yes. And so the microaggressions, the biases, all of those things. And so I remember going back and forth with my own children, I said, we're not going to throw that word out because there are other things that may exist. But my concern came when I started doing my own research. Not only just my research typically starts with myself and then my children. And so
I'm sorry. I just want to ask you a question because I just kind of, in terms of just kind of a different perspective of things. Why is that considered a microaggression instead of people's ignorance? Just their ignorance, that they don't know, and that just even in that context, because what I tell people is we're all ignorant about something because nobody knows everything. So it shouldn't necessarily be seen as as an insult. The word ignorance shouldn't necessarily be considered as an insult because none of us know everything. So why is that characterized as a microaggression as opposed to your ignorance about my people and about just your lack of understanding of my humanity?
Yeah, I would give it both of those characteristics. But my thing is I want to name whatever that is, because once we name something, there can be some level of agreement to what it actually is. Ruth King's book, Mindful Race, and I love her conversation when she says, when you have these conversations with individuals, you have to get their permission to have the conversation. And what does that mean is that you just can't just start just talking because people aren't ready to go there. So it's almost like, it's not like say, hey, can we talk about this? It may be a subtlety. I just went to see Origin, Ava DuVernay's film, and I want to ask you a question about that. What do you think about when she talked about the caste system, or how did you feel when that character did those things? That's how I start conversations, because they can be heavy. And if you don't have, quote unquote, the vocabulary to engage individuals, then it becomes a shouting match. It becomes almost like a debate. But when we've agreed on some of the terms, going back to my own children, because I'm not sending them out. And my children I tell them, my daughters went to a boarding school, and I said it was the most expensive science experiment in my entire life. Ooh. Because again, social experiment, let me say that, because they dealt with wealth. You talk about all girls, dealing with wealth, different cultures, you're dealing with COVID, so many different things that I had to prepare them with. Same thing with my son, who's a Black boy in white spaces. And so it would be great if it says, the question is, what could our society look like if racial disparities didn't exist? That's a good question. But the reality is they do exist. So how do we have this conversation with individuals where we all sort of walk away in hopes of somewhat learning this? It's clear that, science can't address all the concerns and challenges that our children have, but science informs our thinking and hopefully can get us to change certain things. And so you can throw out the science, you can throw out the research, but you just said it's just straight up ignorance. But the reality is a lot of people don't know what they don't know. And so when I'm having these conversations in real time with individuals, I'm always saying, if you're asking questions from a safe space, if you're not asking questions by saying this, I don't want to sound sexist, but Balin, I don't want to sound racist, but Keisha, I don't want to sound homophobic, but Tyrone. I tell people you don't need to preface where you're coming from. We all want to know something about one another. And so what do? Meditation is the practice that has saved my life to allow me to be less judgmental, because you're working toward this. When Val, you and I in high school, we say, we're going to go to the mall and people watch. No, we're not. We're going to the mall to judge. That's what you do. Girl, look at what she's wearing. Boy, look at what she's wearing. Because we're in our profession, we're fixers and we're judges. So what do we discover from meditation is that meditations helps you to be less judgmental. Meditation allows you to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and see it from a different perspective, because you are observing your thoughts. You're observing your thoughts without personifying, without giving them a voice, which is hard for many of us. Because when a thought comes past, we want to add a story to it. And that's the same thing that we do in these toxic spaces. And so my method of dealing with this are meditation practices that I'm constantly sharing with people, because I say, meditation saved my life. No, I said meditation effing saved my life. Because again, I needed a tool that would keep me balanced. And so then I started to teach other Black and brown boys how this practice. There's so many benefits of using meditation to combat racism. We need to be aware of our thoughts, because we know our thoughts will drive us off the chart if we judge them, if we give power to them. But this process is about how do we create a level of awareness of what it is. Awareness of what it is. And many well-intended folks unknowingly harbor racism, which can lead to harmful speech, which can lead to harmful actions. But the majority of us inherit perceptions from other people around us, and we can shake it. So mindfulness makes us aware. That's what it does. It makes us aware. And then when we then are aware, we have the opportunity, Balin, to choose the right action moving forward. And that's what it's done for me. And that's what it's done for many of the people who come into my spaces. And I always start out with that. I'm always start out. People like, and I love that there's so many artists. J. Cole, great interview with J. Cole, talked about how mindfulness helped with this anxiety. Rick Rubin, who was the founder of Def Jam, when he was interviewed by Anderson Cooper on CNN, he said, Anderson, before we start the interview, can we just get grounded? And Anderson Cooper was like, wow, nobody's ever asked me to do that before, but it felt great. It felt great to get grounded before the conversation. I do it before you turn the mics on. I take a couple of deep breaths, because I don't know who's going to be in the space. I don't know where you're coming from, where I'm coming from. So I had to be present in this time. And the present is a gift. And again, I keep going back to Ruth King's book, Mindful Race. It really made me look at things in a different way, because she's been doing this work for such a long time. But then I had to give my own spin to it, because I come from a different culture, a different age, and I'm around a different group of people, but I also can use some of the things that she shared with me.
So the other thing too, I wanted to add to that I think that it's important that anytime you're having a chronic experience or chronic activity or repeated over an extended period of time, you're literally rewiring your brain, right? You are, I tell folks, think of it this way. When you learn how to play the piano, you are rewiring your brain because you're having to learn how to read the notes and learn how and counting and associating the sounds and getting your fingers and your feet and other parts of your body to move. So in doing that, you are rewiring your brain for that activity. And the same thing is true then when it comes to kind of a chronic exposure to racism or discrimination. You are changing the chemicals, or the chemicals are staying, the harmful chemicals of stress stay at an elevated level. And in doing so, they then affect your DNA. They turn some genes on, they turn some genes off. And when you turn genes off and on, then you're also taking the activity of your body. And so so one of the terms people may hear that's called epigenetics, right? In terms of what we think, how we feel, but our exposure to experiences over and over again are turning genes off and on. That's called epigenetics. So what it says is we're not slaves to our genes, that we have the ability to affect our genes and that affect their expression, which basically what that means is what structures it's creating in our bodies or not, that's either creating health or it's creating illness. So that's one of the other reasons why this is so important. Therefore, in having the conversation about the impact of meditation, is that how meditation can impact or disrupt that process of illness.
Yeah, it's Joe Dispenza always say it's an inside job. He says if your mind can make you sick, your mind can make you well. And when I say an inside job, mindfulness-based awareness is key to, I think, justice work. I think mindful meditation is a key to grappling with interpersonal racism, because what it does, balance, it helps people tolerate the discomfort that comes with deeper discussions about race. It can help cultivate a sense of belonging and community, which is another word that you're going to hear a lot, belonging versus fitting in. It can help cultivate a sense of belonging and community for those who experience and fight racism in our day-to-day lives. And that's what we do. It is this is what I was taught this is internal work. It's an inside job. We have to do the internal work so then it can reflect on the outside. Again, when they've hooked up, go ahead.
So I'm sorry. We need to take a break. And then when we come back, we're gonna pick this up, because I do want to again pick up about the importance of what's happening individually, and then of course the impact collectively. Because as you and I both know, Gandhi says, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Right?
Yes.
All right. We'll be right back. We're all on our own path, but many of us encounter the same apparent roadblocks, challenges, and suffering. Discover how your fear, doubts, and disbeliefs disconnect you from spirit, causing you to struggle and forgo your divine gifts and limitless possibilities. Heaven Abounds in You helps you to overcome your mind's roadblocks so you reconnect the spirit and flow. Discover you're always connected to your source. The source of your heart's desires is already within you, and your true identity is infinite potential with limitless possibilities. Heaven abounds in you. host, Dr. Balin A. Durr of Dr. Durr's Living in the Sweet Spot. And joining me today is Dr. LaMarr Darnell Shields, a well-known educator and author who is joining us today as we have this conversation, right, about some of the life-saving self-care that we can do that impacts racism's adverse impact upon our mental health. So before we went to break, we were talking about mindfulness in particular, and we were talking about one, how it affects, we're talking about, I was explaining about, racism's impact upon our genes and turning them on and off, and that creating health or illness. But then there's also the impact upon, then how do we use mindfulness and other techniques like that to counteract those harmful effects upon our mental and physical health, but then also the how that affects the collective. So one of the things so here's the thing, I want to make sure that, because as you said, it's an inside job, and unless people get that it's an inside job, then we keep looking to the outside influences and environment to change. And the fact of the matter is, if someone, I can do my best to educate somebody about how their thinking is off, distorted, frankly, jacked up. But the question is, am I looking at my own thinking to see if it's off, distorted, or jacked up, right? And how what I'm thinking is again affecting the chemicals and hormones in my body that's creating health, and illness. One of the things I love, and I've done meditation for years, is, and I like to keep it simple for people. Meditation is not woo-woo. Is really what it is everything in the physical world is composed of energy, right? And so I keep telling people, why is energy, when you talk about it in the context of science, legitimate, but when you start talking about it in the context of spirituality or religion, then energy becomes woo-woo. It's the same energy. So, how I think and feel about things causes energy to move. And if it moves in a certain way over a certain period of time, it's going to become something in the physical world, right? Either thoughts, feelings, actions, and things, in my experience. So for me, the purpose of meditation is, one, as you said, is to connect with myself, to develop my own awareness of my own thinking, my own awareness of my own feelings, my own fears. And then what am I then doing that's either helpful or harmful to me and those that I interact with, right? And then do I want to continue doing this, thinking this way, feeling this way, doing these things, or I want to do something else? Do I want to activate my, what they call the parasympathetic nervous system, the one that calms you down, right? Which is what meditation and mindfulness does. Calms you down, slows your heart rate, slows your breathing, helps lower those chemicals that are the stress chemicals that over time create illness. So it also, if I'm, when I'm thinking I call it the cray cray. The cray cray is the dysfunctional thoughts, that there's something wrong with who I am. I'm not good enough. I'm inadequate. I'm inferior. I'm never going to live my dreams, all of that. When I start to examine those thoughts, and then if I work with a mantra, which literally means mind tool, to say, no, actually, I'm a star child of the universe made of stardust, because the same atoms in my body comes from exploding stars. The iron in my blood comes from exploding stars. The calcium in my bones comes from exploding stars. Then who I am is something far more and magnificent and uniquely wonderful than my intellect recognized or believed. So that to me is also the beauty and the wonder of doing meditation and mindfulness. It's also about not living in my head out of my memories of the past or my fears of the future, that I can stay here and say, what I'm uniquely wonderful. So there's nothing wrong with me, but there might be some adjustments I need to make. So what do I have right now that I can make the best of in order for me to take the next step, right? And you can do some simple things. I tell people, just it's a matter of connecting with the moment, myself. Meditation doesn't have to be sitting there going, oh, I mean, it can be, but it also, one of my favorites is actually, it can be any activity. And one of my favorites is actually when I'm washing dishes, right?
Yeah.
Soap and the water and the warmth and the surface and the smoothness. And, as you can see, my face is with a smile, right? Because it's just, then I start to experience life on such a deep level. That life force that is a part of everything, whether it's sentient, meaning thinking, moving, or not. That life force, that energy is in and of everything, whether it's a tree or a rock, whether it's you or me. And so I start to experience life and myself on a much deeper level, which then, if I can experience me on that deeper level and then recognize you similarly, then guess what? I get to experience our connection and our similarity, our oneness. You just look different, but you just a different physical expression of the same one life force. And so then I start to see and experience the connection and the oneness of of you and our environment, and then just how amazing you are, right? So we don't need to compete with each other. We can cooperate with each other.
So let me give you an example there, because for my researchers out there, there was a study, to add on what you said, there was a study that came out of, I want to say, Central Michigan University, where they took 72 white college students. They were measured on their levels of implicit bias of African Americans and elderly using it's called the implicit assumption test. Some participants listened to 10 minutes of mindfulness meditation, in which they were instructed to become, I guess, aware of their bodily sensations and heartbeats and breath, and then fully accept those sensations without restriction, resistance, or judgment, because that's what it's about, without restriction, resistance, or judgment. Other participants then listened to a recording just about natural history, voiced by the same narrator. Afterwards, what they discovered that the two groups of students were evaluated on their levels of mindfulness and then reassessed on their levels of implicit bias using this test. Results showed that people who listened to the 10-minute mindfulness recording demonstrated less implicit bias against African Americans and older people on the race and age this test. In other words, the mindfulness and intervention decreased students' automatic biases against Blacks and other adults. So the question becomes, why might this be? Well, what we've discovered and what I've discovered is that mindfulness has been shown before to interrupt the link between the past experience and impulsive responding. All right. So, for example, mindfulness training mindfulness training that they had around people who are overeaters, people that ate a lot. It decreased their automatic attractiveness to sort of fatty foods, allowing them to resist eating those foods when they were presented to them. We also know that mindfulness also encourages a kind of open awareness that can make one more attuned to what's actually occurring, being present. Mm-hmm. This work is about being present, not creating these stories. So meditation is a practice. Mindfulness is about bringing your attention and your awareness to a thing. You can become a mindful eater. You can eat an orange and you can smell the orange and you can be mindful of where was this orange from? Who picked it? What country did it come from? What truck was it on? And so what we're discovering is that being present without judging the thoughts helps you better train your body around decreasing these biases of individuals. And so if we know that it's helping with brain health, is helping with your energy, is helping you to be more aware, why don't you try this tool? My friend who created an app called Exhale, Qatar created an app after the Freddie Gray riots. And what she did, not Freddie Gray, that's in Baltimore, after the George Floyd riots. What she discovered was she couldn't find a space for people of color to unpack this stuff. So she created an app, and I would encourage you to bring her on your show, called Exhale. It's specifically for people of color, because what she discovered, just like what we discovered from boys and girls being in the same classroom, and I talked about this the last time, boys and girls being in the same classroom, listening to the same person, give same instructions, they're getting different images because they're hearing things differently. Mm-hmm. And so in her application, Excel, she said, I'm going to create this specifically for people of color because we are having a different experience. I think about the film, the film Get Out. And when they interviewed Jordan Peele, he said that there was a scene in there where Black folks and white folks were at an event. He said what he discovered is that when we go to these parties, we're having different experiences. Mm-hmm. Black folks are having different experiences, just like women, just like, gay, transgender, LGBTQ plus are having different experiences. So let's not say that they don't exist. Let's say that they exist. Even when we're listening to music, we walk into a club, you and I, and we're listening to a Nicki Minaj song, we're having a different experience. We have to help people unpack that and own whatever that it is, so mm-hmm. people don't start looking at them sideways and say, oh, you just tripping. Because what happens is people say, get over it. These aren't things that we can get over. When I go back to the film Origin, you're going to see this stuff is embedded all around us. So meditation and mindfulness and yoga and all these other practices and breath work is a tool to help you combat some of these things. Is it the only thing? No, it's not. But it's a tool that we are seeing that has some great research to sort of connect it to how it can affect us. And we all need tools to be successful in the world that we're actually living in.
Absolutely. So one, I just want folks to also understand how you going to get over something that's quote unquote embedded in your DNA. And the research of course shows with these adverse childhood experiences that it does alter one's DNA. And when you alter DNA, that means then you're passing that DNA on to subsequent generations. The racism, the trauma from this chronic racism, even the microaggressions, is then being passed, let alone the more overt violence that folks experience. So that's being passed along in the DNA generation after generation, and therefore is affecting how people think, feel, and behave. And so how do you don't, that's not something you just quote unquote get over when it's embedded in your DNA, and you don't even know that it's in your DNA, because this is only fairly recent research. So I think that's
so to add to that, in the DNA, going back to Ruth King's work in her book, Ruth King, and I had never heard of this before. She said racism is a heart disease. You hear me? She said racism is a heart disease. How we think and respond is at the core of racial suffering and racial healing. If we cannot think clearly and respond wisely, we will continue to damage the world's heart. And when I talk about the work that I do, I call it not safe work. Because when people say, we're going to create a safe space, I'm like, fool, I just met you. Ain't nothing safe about the space. Let's take that and let's not talk about a safe space. Let's call it a courageous space. Because when you look at the root word of courageous, C-O-R, in Latin, it means core. It means your heart. In Spanish, corazón. So what I'm doing is I'm sharing my heart with you. So when I heard Ruth King say that racism is a heart disease and that the world's heart is on fire and race is at the core, it was shocking to me. I never heard that before. And so it made me want to know more and more and more about this work. And so again, as I think about.
So here's the thing, and it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. If you recognize that everything in the physical world is made of energy, and really that's what Einstein's theory of general relativity is, E equals mc squared. It just means energy and matter are interchangeable. Energy and the physical things are interchangeable. It's moving back and forth between energy and the things that we see and own. So that collective energy, that we're all connected. So if we're doing things that are harmful to each other, we're doing things that harm ourselves. Even the person doing the harm is actually harming themselves, but then you're also harming the collective. So that's why it makes sense about the Earth's heart, because it's the collective heart, the collective energy that's being harmed by our fear. Because let's be clear, that's what we're talking about. We're fundamentally talking about, I'm afraid that you are going to get access to resources that me and mine won't get, and so we're going to go without, and that's going to be harmful and damaging. That's essentially what that means. And folks that are really judged, frankly, the mind is designed to judge and to give meaning, to assign meanings in order to assess threat. Is this helpful? Is this threatening? So it's constantly doing that, but also in the process, usually people that are really judgmental of other people are really judgmental of themselves. And so, absolutely.
That's why we talk about coming together as one in unison. I think one of my favorite quotes, you know, a movie that's from Wakanda. There's a quote from one of my favorite movies, Black Panther, where this Howard Rad T'Challa, the king of Wakanda, says, "In times of crisis, the wise build bridges while the foolish build barriers." And meditation is an extension of being connected with one another. Dr. King even went a little deeper when he talked about, going back to Ruth King's work, when he says, one day we'll learn that the heart can never be totally right if the head is totally wrong. Only through the bringing together of the head and heart, intelligence and goodness, shall man and woman rise to a fulfillment of his or her own true nature. And what this thing has done to me is help me connect to my true nature. What it's done for my children is help them to connect to their true nature. When my friend Katara McCarty created Exhale, she wanted women of color to be connected to their true nature by creating an emotional well-being app. That's what this stuff is doing for us. It's not about making us soft. When I wrote my book, Don't Just Sit There, Do Something. I flipped it around because my pastor was the first time he said, don't just sit there, do something. He said, well, let's flip it around. Don't just do something, sit there. Mm-hmm. And I never heard of that before, because my mom said, boy, don't just sit there, do something. And my pastor, shout out to Willie F. Wilson, Union Temple Baptist Church, he said, don't just do something, sit there. Mm-hmm. Sit in all of your glory. Sit in all of your mess. Sit in all of your ancestor stuff, the good and the bad, and be in tune to what's around you, but shut off everything around you, and you will sort of feel that energy when you tap into the breath, when you put your feet on the ground, when you put your palms on your lap and you're feeling that energy. Don't just sit there, do something. Don't just do something. Just sit there and be attuned to your breath. Notice how it goes up and down, that you don't even have to do any work, but just pay attention to it. Just pay attention to the breath. And when you hear people say, you know, you took my breath away, there's some deepness in that. Yes, you take your own breath away. And these are the tools that I've been using, that I've been incorporating into corporate America, that I've been incorporating in the clergy, that I've been incorporating in the school system because these are the things that I'm seeing that are work. When they told me that you can't get a bunch of black and brown boys to sit still, and my intellectual arrogance said, watch me. After day 3, y'all missed that. After day 3, these boys says, Dr. Shields, we're supposed to start out with our meditation and mindfulness. One kid told this principal, Balance gonna crack you up. She said, this little boy said, is Dr. Shields coming back? Is Dr. Shields come back? Because I need my medication. I need my medication. He was like, is Dr. Shields giving out medication? She called me on the phone like, he's giving out medication. She said, oh, he must have been meaning meditation.
Right.
So even this little boy who was trying to figure it out saw that there was something in the power of being still and the power of breath.
Right. So here's the thing that I want to make the connection to as it relates to the school system, because we're getting down here to the last minute or so, which is, again, one, it's important to recognize that even for children, especially for younger children, that meditation does not have to be done while you're sitting. There are schools where the kids start off meditation at the beginning of the day and then later in the day, and they actually do it by the kids walking through the halls. So you can walking can be a meditation. Really, meditation is it's really, in mindfulness, is immersing yourself in the experience. So are you paying attention to picking up your foot and putting it down, and the next, and fully immersed and engrossed in that experience? So I want them to understand that there's that aspect. Again, it can be done moving. You can drinking this water, if I weren't speaking, could be a meditation. Is because it's me being connected. Now, the other benefits, again, just to talk about specifically about the school kids, is if you're traumatized or stressed, one of the difficulties you're going to have is focus and memory, which is going to impair your ability to learn. So I think that so I wanted to just bring that up, is like you said, is one of the beauties of teaching that in the school system is actually its ability to help our children learn.
Yeah, and I want, if you give me permission, before we wrap up, I would love to take your audience through a meditation practice. I would love to walk them through.
Let's do that right now.
Yeah, let's do it. So let's get ready. Okay. If you're driving in your car, please pull over. We do not want you to be doing this in your vehicle. You can pull over. If you are walking and listening to this, just take a moment. So first, make yourself comfortable wherever that may be. Feel the connection between the back of your body and the chair, or if you're lying on the floor. And if you're seated like I am, lengthen up through your spine and broaden through your collarbones, and let your hands rest on your thighs, palms facing up or down. Once you are settled, close your eyes or soften your gaze. So close your eyes or soften your gaze, and tune into your breath. Notice your breath without trying to change it. And notice also if you feel tense or relaxed without trying to change that either. Now we're going to inhale through our nostril and then exhale through our mouth. Continue to take a deep breath. 4 breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. As you breathe, become aware of the state of your mind and your body and the quality of your mind. Where is your body holding tension? Do you feel closed off or shut down emotionally? Where is your mind? Is it wandering, or is it at home within the breath? Is your mind at ease or filled with restlessness, negativity, and doubt? Now place both hands over your heart and continue to inhale through your nostrils and exhale out of your mouth. Ask yourself quietly, how does it feel to place my hands over this tender area? This place where I experience love for self and others. Let your breath become more smooth and effortless and begin to breathe in and out. Feel the flow of air moving into your lungs and then back out into the world. With each exhale, imagine you are releasing any negative thoughts that may be lingering in your mind. Continue to focus on your breath. On each inhale, think I am worthy. And each exhale, I am enough. Let each inhale draw in self-love, and each exhale release what is no longer serving. Take a few minutes to breathe and recite this mantra internally. Notice how you feel as you say these words to yourself. I am enough. I am here. I am present. If your mind wanders at any point, know that it's okay. It's the nature of the mind to wander. Simply bring your attention back to the breath. Notice how your thoughts come and go, whether positive or negative, and simply allow them to pass on by like clouds floating in the sky. Now visualize yourself standing in front of a mirror and looking into your own eyes. What do you see? Pain, sadness, or joy? Regardless of what appears in the reflection, tell yourself, I love you. You are beautiful. You are worthy of happiness. Know that what you see in this mirror in this moment may be different from what you see the next time. Imagine now that you could breathe into your heart and visualize love pouring out. Let this warm and permanent feeling of your heart fill up the rest of your body. Feel a sense of comfort and calm traveling through each organ, through your chest, your neck. Allow the sensation to fill up with warmth. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Take one more deep breath and let it out.
So, well, thank you for that, my brother. It's much appreciated. Of course, I feel much more relaxed and at ease. And frankly, what it reminds me of is conversation that that I had with God, and God said to me, I said something. I said, he's telling me something to do. I'm like, is it that simple or that easy? And he's like, yeah. I said, I forget. He says, no, you don't forget. He said, you disconnect. Now that you're reconnected, you just flow. So the thing, of course, that to me, the mindfulness does and the meditation does is it reconnects me to flow. So I want to and things just are so much, even in the things that we encounter that are difficult and challenging, being in the flow and the connection to oneness and all there is enables me to tap and access that wisdom, that energy, that power, that presence in order to help me to deal with whatever challenge or adversity is before me. So I want to thank you so much for that. I want to encourage the listeners to go grab your book. Don't just do something. Just sit there.
So the book is Don't Just Do Something, Sit There.
Yeah.
And it's 65 days of meditation to transform your life. And they can go to justsitthere.org to pick up the book. And then anything about me is, drlds.com. But justsitthere.org. meditate.org. Join the movement of meditators all over the country, and your life will definitely change and shift. So thank you for having me again.
Well, thank you so much. And, we'll say we will push the pause button, and we will do this again sometime. And thank you again.
Thank you.
I am your host, Dr. Balin A. Durr, and I hope you have learned something that helps you connect to yourself, either through meditation, whether sitting or movement. Some life-saving self-care that connects you to yourself, to your being, to the deepest core and essence of your being, that helps you just be your amazing, magnificent self. Again, I am your host, Dr. Balin A. Durr, awakening and empowering you to live out your infinite potential, to live life in a sweet spot. I'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us today in the sweet spot. Share, follow, and like us on social media. To learn more, please visit balinadurmd.com, spelled BALINADURRMD.com. Join us next week, and remember, when you heal your mind, all things are possible.